Sorry. I welcome members of the public and press. And I'm just going to, Shirley, Councillor Smart is at her last meeting on this particular committee, and just wanted to say a word. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, it is with much sadness, actually, that this is my last meeting. I represent Part Iwalk, and well, for a number of meetings now, this meeting clashes with a meeting that I should be at for the Community Council. And it doesn't seem right because the meetings seem to get quite elongated for planning meetings here these days, that I need to go at 6:15 every meeting. I also must say that being almost a dinosaur, not quite, walking over some of the site visits these days has proved perhaps a little difficult, but I've been looked after so well by both Ollie and the chairman and the rest of you, but particularly those two people, and I don't really think that I can keep on asking you to do it. So I wish you well to continue. Planning is in my blood. It's been in my blood for more years than perhaps I like to admit to these days. And so I wish you all well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And thank you, Shirley, on behalf of the Planning Committee. Thank you for your service to this committee. We look forward to a nomination from Iwalk for your replacement. Thank you.
Yes, I think, well, nomination.
Just wish to introduce the officers. We've got John Metcalfe, Chief Executive, Chris Potter, the Monitoring Officer, Ollie Bolter, Strategic Manager of Planning and Infrastructure, Justin Thorne, Strategic Manager for Legal Services, Russell Trick, Planning Team Leader there, Alan White from Highways, Ben Gard, our Legal Advisor, and Jodie Gibson, our Trainee Legal Advisor, and Marie Bartlett, Committee Clerk. Paul Fuller, the Cabinet Member for Planning and Community Engagement, in attendance. Councillor Karen Lucioni is being substituted tonight by Councillor John Medland, so welcome John. And Councillor Vanessa Churchman is being substituted by Councillor Paul Brading. Welcome, Councillor Brading. And we have apologies from Councillor Claire Critchison, who's very poorly, so we send her our wishes to get better. There are no planned fire drills during this meeting. If you hear the fire alarm sound, please treat it as a real emergency and evacuate the building via the nearest safe escape route. The nearest escape route is via the signposted set of stairs to your left as you leave the council chamber or public gallery. Exit via the door at the back of the building, walk across the inner car park around the building to the evacuation point, which is the pavement opposite the police station. The lifts can't be used in the event of any emergency. Please don't re-enter the building until you're advised it's safe to do so by a council member or staff. I request mobile phones are switched off or to mute, and request that all speakers use the microphones. Request that there's no food is consumed during the meeting unless it's for medical need. Just to remind members that they cannot leave the council chamber during the actual presentation of the planning application or debate on an application. If they leave, they will be unable to vote on that application. Remind members of the public, both in the room and watching virtually, that they are present purely to observe the process and will not be permitted to speak unless they have registered to speak in advance. Now move to agenda and take in order as printed. Previous minutes. Do I have a proposer? Councillor Quirk, a seconder for the minutes. Councillor Price. Those in favour of the minutes? I think that's any abstentions? So two abstentions. Okay. I will just sign the minutes. Declarations of interest. Councillor Spink.
I should say that in relation to the motion of Councillor Jarman, it's right to say that I made a donation of £100 to the crowdfunding of the judicial review. I do not consider myself predetermined in terms of the motion, but thought it right to make that declaration. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other declarations? No. We now move to public question time. I have received no questions in writing. Is there any questions from the public gallery? No. We go on to item 4, which is the motion submitted by Councillor Jarman. Just for information for members, I'm going to follow the rules of debate as they would be in.
The chairman in the past has actually said that he is, has a prejudicial interest in this item. It seems inappropriate for him under those circumstances to chair the meeting. I've just raised that.
I've had discussions and taken legal advice, and that after listening to that advice, I've made the decision as chair that I will continue to chair all the items of this meeting.
Was that advice clear cut?
The final advice I had, yes, was clear cut, that I particularly took, yes.
Outside of the meeting, I would like to see that.
Thank you.
Would it be possible, Chair, for us to have a summary of that advice from the monitoring officer before we continue? I think it's imperative that the public are aware of why you have made this decision and if it is contrary to the advice that has been given to you by the monitoring officer. Thank you.
I'm happy, as in answer to Councillor Quirk's question, to provide that. As I am the elected member or chair of this committee, it is my final decision of whether I feel that I can actually chair this meeting, and I've made that decision to chair the meeting. Thank you.
Can you confirm that your decision to continue is contrary to the advice, the clear-cut advice of the monitoring officer?
I have not received actual advice today or seen advice. I haven't been on my emails, so anything after 11:30 I have not seen. So if advice has come after that time, but from the advice that I had and talking to the LGA and other lawyers, I have come to the balanced view that I can chair this motion. Thank you. Brady.
Just as a point of order, you have stated publicly that you will not vote on the issue of the motion this evening, which I respect that and I accept that. With 10 people around this room, what happens if it's a 5-all vote, where the chair would normally have the casting vote, where you've stated you will not vote? We could get a situation where we have a split committee without anyone with a casting vote. So I'd like to know how that would play through in practice, please.
You're correct. I have actually stated I will not vote on the actual item as a member of this committee. I reserve the right as chair on the position of casting vote.
That can't be right. I'm sorry, that cannot be right. If you're not going to vote, you are voting because you have the casting vote if it gets that far. So it doesn't follow that you said you publicly won't vote, but then you now said you are going to vote if it gets to a 5-all split.
I will not vote, all right? But if it comes to a casting vote, I will use that casting vote to break that tie if that comes out. I'm hoping that that is not the particular case, but that's my clarity, and I can actually, it is in my right as chair to make that decision. Can we move to the motion as proposed by Councillor Jarman?
Thank you, Chair. The motion is in the paper that's been distributed. It was modified with the agreement and at the request specifically of the monitoring officer. I have a small introduction, as is customary according to protocol, in raising the motion, and I will formally move the motion at the end of the introduction. It has, unfortunately, taken us 8 painful months to reach this day. On that long path, we have shared our many concerns regarding safety of the WAP application process, and hence the discussion and decision which followed. We have challenged many assertions we were given, and we have gained a wealth of new understanding that has enabled us to view the events of July 2021 with much greater clarity. We are substantially better informed. We have before us a motion that recognises that none of us are perfect, that we make mistakes, that we can learn from them, and in this one moment have the chance to put them right. I believe that each of us carries inside them serious concerns regarding the multiple and changing regulatory advice we were given, issues pertaining to the site visit, directions on the validity of the current local plan, and on the exclusion of councillors, and taken in concert the correctness, fairness, and legality of the whole process. We have admitted these concerns and recognised the wrongful advice and misdirections in open meetings, to each other in person and in emails. And we have shared our views with external residents groups, external solicitors, and in the media. You will have received briefings that suggest that many of these issues and failings can be justified, defended, and ultimately signed away. Certainly, the opportunity to defend mistakes would be much easier through judicial review, where the bar is higher. Whilst it may be possible to ultimately defend a case, that should not be our primary concern. We have a duty to correctly follow practice and the law, and we are advised by many, including the LGA and Planning Advisory Service, that we did not. It is not sufficient simply to defend our mistakes and to leave the stain sitting on the reputation of the Council and this Planning Committee. Doubts and allegations would persist in the belief of very many residents and would only be bolstered by such a defensive course of action. Amongst the many items, we can include correction of the faulty direction regarding the validity of the local plan. We can correct the exclusion of the ward councillor. We can correct the exclusion of Councillor Price. We must bring this tainted matter back, correct the failings observed, and resolve to do it right. It is our duty and the expectation of our residents. And I formally move the motion as per the paper. Do I have a seconder?
Councillor Midland.
Thank you, Chair. I wish to second. I don't wish to go into great detail on this. I was at the original decision in July and felt very disappointed and worried about it afterwards. And I'm very pleased that we have the opportunity to go back and rectify, I think, what was in retrospect an error. And I fully support Councillor Jarman's motion.
It's open for debate. Members have 3 minutes if they wish to speak. Do I have anyone who wishes to speak? There
have been a lot of assertions as fact that are opinion in terms of the background to this resolution. There is a potential for a judicial review. The documents or the procedures that were followed in this case were actually signed off by a judge, District Judge Miles, and opinions were taken as to how the rules and the laws should be interpreted. It seems to me appropriate that the correct way to let this proceed is to let it go to judicial review and have a judicial review that looks at what we did, how we did it, and gives a definitive answer, not an opinion, but a definitive answer as to the interpretation of the law. For that reason, I'm minded to vote against this motion, because we're just going to continue arguing about these things. It's going to be, if it wasn't this one, it would be the next one and the next one coming back. We need to have planning back on an even keel. This is a totally unsatisfactory way to proceed. It's not the way we've ever worked in the past. I think it's despicable, and I am opposed to this motion.
Councillor Price and then Councillor Spink.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I've always supported trying to ensure the right decision is made, and I've never walked in that door with an opinion or with a pre-made decision. Let's say I might have opinions, but I never walk in there with a ready-made decision on anything. I always listen to the debate. I listen to the officers, the objectors, the supporters, and so on, and the other members when I make a decision. I've always been quite supportive of the idea that perhaps this came to committee, my opinion, it came to this committee too quickly in a new council. It came before inexperienced members. When I was told I couldn't participate, I accepted that. I accepted that because I wasn't at the full site visit. The head of planning told me at the time that if I left the site, it would be likely I wouldn't be able to participate. And another example of that is that I've walked in that door 5 minutes late before, after we've already started a debate, and I've not been able to then participate or vote, and I've accepted that. So, you know, I've always followed what we've been told. To find out during this process that actually site visits are, who knows whether we should or shouldn't attend site visits. I've always tried to make sure that I attend a site visit, and if I can't, I've always taken the line that I probably would no longer participate in that application, and I've often left a meeting early. My issue with this, and I hope you will just allow me to go over the 3 minutes if it comes to it. My issue with this is that I saw in this application probably an end to any chance of us staying dairy self-sufficient on the Isle of Wight, or becoming dairy self-sufficient on the Isle of Wight. That was probably the biggest element to this. Forget most of the planning issues. It really comes down to whether we were jeopardising future dairy farming on the island, and probably this decision has jeopardised that. Okay, but I feel, and I absolutely respect the spirit of this motion. I think trying to say that protocol wasn't followed and so on is, as time's gone by, I've become less convinced, I've got to say. I feel more now that it was actually, on the whole, an inexperienced planning committee that made that decision, but it was still a legally elected planning committee. So in that respect, it would be very hard for this decision to be changed and then be upheld in a court of law, in my opinion. I think what really this decision tonight pivots on, and I think this is absolutely critical for us to understand right now, is if this was brought back before committee, is this site going to continue as a dairy farm? If it isn't, I now feel that it would be grossly inappropriate to bring this back to committee for redetermination, because I actually feel that any chance of a reason for rejection, I've really looked hard at this application, and I can see no other reason for rejections, despite how I might feel about it. Do I feel that this site should be built on? Opinion at this moment in time, without being predetermined, probably no. But I think the dairy farming element of it is very important, because I think that will pivot on what decisions.
Can I just respect what you said, Councillor Price? I think the point is not for us to actually discuss the merits of the application. The key is on the process, i.e. was a process followed, right? That this motion is putting forward that it wasn't, right? And the decision for us today is, if process we felt is not followed, then this committee has the right to, before consent is given, to actually recall it. And that is a decision thing. The actual merits of the case, of the application, and for not really to be discussed at this point.
Chairman, I totally respect that, and I understand what you're saying, but I do feel that we could inadvertently make a really bad decision if we bring it back and something has changed significantly in regards to the use of that site to the time of the application in July. What I think I probably want to ask, we've got 3 legal representatives here, 2 of which have been here certainly since I've been on this council. Can we have an absolute piece of advice from the collective of those 3 as to whether they feel protocol was broken? I've read everything else, and I'm still not sure.
This is not a question and answer session, right?
Chairman, if you want me to make a decision tonight, I'm going to have some answers, I'm afraid.
in following a debate of the full council procedure rules, it is not a question and answer decision. You've been provided various information from the last meetings and during this meetings, right? And you have to make a judgment. The particular thing on the application is we don't know until it came back as one of those unquestions, right? That is those questions that you would ask at a recall meeting if you so decided tonight for that course of action. Any other questions? Sorry, any other contributions to debate? Councillor Warren.
Do you mean Councillor Drew? Peter, I think, was first. Councillor.
Oh, sorry, I apologise, Councillor Spinks. First, thank you.
This matter, I was only been elected, as it were, as a councillor for a few weeks when this matter came before planning committee. And I have to say that I was shocked and surprised by what, in my view, was the amount of pressure that the planning committee was put under by, I have to say this because it's my view, by planning officers and by the acting chair. And I wrote straight away to ask for this matter to be called back under the provisions in the Constitution of the cooling off period. That request was refused by the monitoring officer. Now, the merits of this application, in the sense of whether planning permission should have been granted, are irrelevant, as the chair has said, to this motion. What went on at that planning committee will be reviewed one way or the other. It will either be reviewed if we vote, as it were, not to recall it. It will be reviewed almost certainly by a judicial review and a High Court judge. If we vote to call it back to our committee, we can then review it when we can then look at the merits of the application. It seems to me that it is right that we should reconsider it, and I therefore support the motion. The reason for that is that as a matter of law, we have a right to reconsider, and that is set out in the Chief Executive's report. And secondly, we also have a duty to do so if the decision to grant planning permission without recalling it could be unlawful. And that is the case of Kides and South Cambridgeshire. Now, Councillor Price has outlined difficulties which, in my view, do exist here, because there were material, in my view, irregularities which are likely to be upheld on a judicial review. The effect of that will be that it comes back to us as a planning committee. Judicial review does not change the decision. It makes a declaration as to procedural irregularities and then says, in effect, to the planning committee, have another go. And in my view, we should take the opportunity, and indeed we have a duty to take that opportunity. The difficulty that this committee is in my view, is outlined by Councillor Price, and that is this, that we have seen legal advice from the solicitors who represent the parties wishing to bring the judicial review. That legal advice cites various authorities and looks at first reading and second reading and indeed third reading, which I've done, to be quite convincing. The problem, I'll only be 3 more sentences. The problem that we have, however, is that the council has chosen not to disclose their legal advice, and so we as a committee are unable to weigh it up. Now, as a prima facie, as it were, there is a strong case, therefore, which is not rebutted legally by the council, to reconsider this matter and to discharge our duty under the case that I've cited. And we can look at the merits of this again. That's my submission, and I ask you please to support this motion.
Thank you, Chair. It occurs to me, I think this is essentially a case about threshold, as Councillor Jarman has alluded to, and I'm not entirely convinced, based on what I've seen from Richard Buxton's solicitors, that actually the judicial review does meet that threshold. I think the concerns that I have are essentially what was material in that particular meeting in July, which was significant enough to have affected the outcome in a deleterious fashion. And frankly, I think notwithstanding the fact that I would probably admit there was a certain amount of frenetic pressure in that meeting, but as somebody who initially proposed a motion, I don't think it was such that any robust member of the council would be able to withstand that and to articulate their own sentiments about why they were or were not choosing a particular motion to pursue. And I think the question, when it comes to a judicial review, a judge will be very loath to substitute or intervene in a situation where a democratically elected council and a planning committee has articulated its reasons why it is opposing or proposing a certain view. I think the question comes down essentially to, we have Councillor Spink, who has said that essentially this is a matter of duty. I'm not sure it's a matter of duty. I think it's a matter of consideration as to what would have been different if this had been considered in another way. I don't think the exclusion of the chair of other members was particularly germane, because we still had a legitimate debate. We were still quorate as a planning committee. So I am struggling to understand what actually would satisfy that particular threshold. And I'd be interested to hear what other members say.
Thank you, Councillor Brading.
Thank you, Chairman. This was always going to be a very difficult decision, but as are all planning applications come to this committee, they're all difficult decisions. Whilst being new to planning, I've observed many planning meetings over the previous 4 years. As part of the training, it was always, you enter this room open-minded, listen to the views, as Matt said, listen to the views of others and comments. What's been clear to me since that first meeting, there was a lot of predetermined people at the first meeting, and clearly there's a lot of predetermined. I came into this meeting this evening with an open mind on, which way the vote was going to go, listen to what people's views. There was a lot of predetermination. Matt accepted with grace and dignity the fact he couldn't vote at the previous meeting because he didn't attend the planning or site. And Councillor Adams actually attended most of the site visit, but not all of it. There was no pressure. At the previous meeting, the only pressure was making a difficult decision. I didn't feel under any pressure from officers' guidance, any pressure from legal guidance, any pressure from the chair. It was a difficult decision that had to be made. We were advised, we were listened to all the people that spoke to us, and I think we made, on the evening, a correct decision. I've read all the legal paperwork since then, and I am minded to vote against this motion, but I'll still listen to the rest of the comments. But my thought process is that we did follow a procedure on that evening. There certainly was no pressure put on anyone to make a decision. I don't know where that comment came from, but I'm minded at the moment to vote against the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brading. Councillor Adams.
In reference to Councillor Brading's comments, Councillor Brading doesn't know the facts surrounding my circumstances with it, and pressure was applied. And it's I'd solicitors' letters from Southampton, from the developers' solicitors, for comments that I'd made before I stood to become a councillor, and pressure was applied. And I just think with this You know, this is an accumulation of events and processes which to the public are not transparent. And I feel we have a duty now to put this right. And I feel we're failing in our duty if we do not put this right.
Thank you, Councillor Oliver, and then Councillor Brodie.
Thank you, Chair. It's one of the ones who made the decision back 8 months ago. I struggle when I'm being at. We spent 4 hours making the decision, taking all the facts into account, all the guidance which was given us on the night. I don't speak legal speak. I take all the facts on as I think they are. I look at the facts. We did all the site visits. We did everything. I abstained from the first vote on it because I couldn't make a decision, until we'd had more information given to us, which then took us into the 4th hour of the planning committee. And at that stage, it became clear, look, we didn't have enough to say no to this application. And I cannot see why 8 months later, even if new facts have come on board, 8 months later, we're suddenly looking at something completely different from a different angle now from where we were looking at it, back in June last year. I think some of the language is appalling, to be perfectly honest. It's tainted, and it's this. We're all being sort of put into brackets. Well, if you don't vote this way, you're wrong, and if you vote that way, you're right. And I struggle with all of that. I look at the facts and I make a decision based on those facts. And I think as a committee, we made a decision based in June, and I cannot see how and why we should go back on that decision.
Thank you, Councillor Brodie.
Last July was possibly the most difficult planning committee I've sat on, and apart from Councillor Price, I've been on this committee the longest. The fallout from that has been frankly atrocious. I won't go into all the implications for me and my partner, but we're fairly robust people. But all in all, by about November of last year, I was beginning to have doubts, because I left that meeting certain that everything had been done properly. Indeed, I asked the officers, many of whom are sat up there, was that okay? There was no disagreement. People were content with the way the meeting had been run, with the way the meeting had been chaired. I'm an experienced chair of meetings. I know I'm robust, but I'm very experienced at running difficult meetings. But in November, it was becoming quite evident how much anger there was around. This decision had led to misrepresentation of me within the administration, leading to me leaving the administration. And I took a view at one point that maybe, yes, we should have reconsideration. But the chief executive at that point sought legal advice from a QC and Mr. Mark Heather, a respected and esteemed former local authority solicitor in Southampton, all of which legal advice has been shared with every member of this committee. It has been disclosed. And it was very clear to me on reading both of those documents that this was a safe decision, that was entirely defendable at JR. That any procedural concerns, which I don't see, frankly, would easily, well, not easily, nothing's easy in a court of law, but would be defendable. And I state here and now that if we ever get to a JR, and I think we should, I will happily and robustly defend everything that happened at that meeting to any court in the land. That maybe makes officers shrink with fear, but I will be there and I will defend it robustly, because nothing wrong happened at that meeting. Councillor Price never had an issue with being advised by me that he couldn't continue, having not attended the whole site visit. In fact, Councillor Price has shared with me it's happened to him in the past, and he's accepted that without any argument. He's not like me. He's not an argumentative chap in public. Maybe he is behind the scenes, but, you know, he accepted it. In my view, I will be voting against this motion. Just briefly, Chair, I will be voting against this motion. I think we need to put it to bed on this council. If the objectors wish to pursue a GR, then they should get on with it. Let's put it to bed here. I believe it is a cancer at the heart of this council. I really do. And we're not going to start dealing with it unless we deal with it tonight and put it aside and issue the approval. And I can say all the things about housing need, but I won't, Chair. I'll respect that we're talking about the procedure rather than anything else. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Have I got any others? Because otherwise I think we'll move to the vote. Oh. Councillor Jarman to say his summing up.
Thank you, Chairman. I think what I probably need to sort of hear from the horse's mouth, really, and you know, we've had a bit of an overload of information, let's face it, from all sorts of places. You know, I have been very supportive of reconsidering this, but as I say, over recent times, I've become more and more concerned that we're going to just make it worse. Okay, if we chose to support bringing this application back before committee and an alternative decision is reached, where are we likely to be from a defendable position? I think it's absolutely critical. Otherwise, you know, I don't want to abstain on this. I don't abstain generally. It's very rarely you'll see me abstain, but I don't feel I could make a decision myself. You know, I support the ethos of bringing this back, but I, on the other hand, feel it's just going to add some infection into this open wound that we've got. And if we bring it back and we make a different decision, exactly where do we think that leaves us? What advice can we just have on that last definitive question?
I think it's up to proposer to. Can we advise those?
I don't think we can advise.
I
don't think we can advise.
Sorry?
I don't think we can advise.
Sorry, the advisors is that we at this in this context we actually can't provide. I do that obviously if it is brought back, it would be brought back in the next 2 to 3 meetings, you know, quite quickly, right? Because it's very clear a decision has to be made, because different from the 27th of July, the actual consent and legal agreements are now all in place. So whatever if the decision, i.e. for the motion was supported, then a recall meeting would be called quite quickly. If not, i.e. it was refused, i.e. the against was the majority on the motion, then consent would be issued quite quickly, right? Within that, because that is in place.
I understood you were going to conduct this debate in accordance with the motions on notice to full council under the constitution that allows for one contribution per councillor, apart from the person who has a right to reply. I think we should move on with this. We don't want to keep picking at the scab. Thank you.
I accept that. Can we move to Councillor Jarman to do his summing up? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This motion is not about the examination of that decision in July 21. It does not seek to overturn that decision. It is about the process leading up to that decision. So I am very focused here on the process, not about the outcome. And I am not seeking through this motion to overturn that decision. If, and I'm talking to each of the members who will vote on the committee this evening, if you can put your hand on your heart and state that the original advice you were given, the analysis on the local plan, the guidance on attendance, and the procedure that were followed were without fault, then you should reject this motion. If, however, you cannot, then it is implicit that there was failings with that process. And you may care to join with me in concluding that the process itself was unsafe. And you should allow this process to be rerun, as I believe many of us know it should have been, and indeed, as we've been told, it is correct practice and procedure, and that you should therefore vote to do the right thing and support the motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We now got a motion proposed by Councillor Jarman and seconded by Councillor Medland. So, okay. Thank you. We've got a named vote. Yeah. Can we have those in favour?
Chairman, to help the process, if I call out the names of each member, and then if each member says whether they're for or against the motion. So, Councillor Adams. For. Councillor Brading. Against. Councillor Brodie.
Against.
Councillor Drew.
Against.
Councillor Jarman. Councillor Medland.
For.
Councillor Oliver.
Against.
Councillor Spink. For. Councillor Quirk. Against. Councillor Price. Oh, Chairman, I assumed
I
you weren't
abstain.
voting. Thank you.
Right, yeah. We have 4 for the motion and 6 against, 1 abstention. The motion falls. Thank you. We move forward to item 5, but we'll have a 5-minute break so that we can rearrange the room. Thank you. Oh, yes. That's right. So do I just say that now? Or
No, when you move on to
yeah. Just turn it. Okay, can I call order? Can I actually go on to, we're moving on to item 5. Just for our guests, just wish to go through the lighting system, all right? If you can see, there is a traffic light system of red, amber, green. When you're asked to speak, the green light will display. And when you have 30 seconds left, the amber light will display. And when the red light displays, I'll stop you. I will stop you talking. This is to ensure that all parties receive the same amount of time and the process is seen to be fair. That. Sorry. The report of the Strategic Manager for Planning and Infrastructure. And we have the planning application reference number 21017960 OUT, which is an outline for residential development with new access, internal road layout and parking. And the site address is land at the rear of 69 and part OS 8361, Station Road, Wootton, Isle of Wight, PO 33. I will now ask Mr. Chick to do the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Good evening, councillors. So the application site is located to the south of the main centre of Wootton. It's outlined on this plan in red, as you can see here. There is a section of blue also, but that is left out of this planning application. Important reference marks on this plan are Station Road, off to the west of the application site, and then Paxfield Lane, quite an attractive bridleway that is off to the east towards Fern Hill. This is an aerial shot of the application site. As you can see, it is formed by one field, currently split. It's used for grazing horses at the moment with the stables in the corner, which I'll show you in some photographs later on. Again, Station Road, located off to the east of the site. As you can see at the point of the red dot. And just for distance, it's 0.4 kilometres away from the Cedars pub crossroads there in Wootton. And it's about 0.7 kilometres from the crossroads of Brittlesford Road and Park Road, which is just down here where the cursor is now. What you can see in this aerial shot is the amount of woodland off to the east of the site, and belts of trees just off to the south of the site. So this belt of trees here, which includes some protected trees, forms the southern boundary of the site. It's about 130 metres long. And then there's further belts of trees further to the south, off towards Wootton Station here, where the steam railway operates. Just a slightly zoomed in version of the application site. From this slide, you can see the application site and the dwelling that would be removed to form the vehicular access, which I'll show you on some plans in a moment. That's 69 Station Road. It's obviously in a an existing linear group of dwellings that run alongside the road on either side. And there is also a backland dwelling here. This is number 63 Station Road. And then various dwellings also in Paxfield Lane, just here. So 1 and 2 styles cottages here. And this property here at the point of the cursor is known as Red Barn. And I've got some photographs of those properties to show you in a moment. Just for island plans, just to show what the designations around the area are. The application site itself has no designations, ecology or any other matter. The purple dots you can see are the protected trees that I've referred to earlier on. So there's a line of oaks and ashes and limes alongside this boundary, and all of the remaining dots are also protected trees, but they are well outside of the application site. The AONB boundary is over here around Wootton Creek. It follows the line up to the hotel that overlooks the creek there. The areas in green are open space, and the orange dashed lines here relate to a sink, but obviously that's well distant from the site with dwellings in between.
Sorry, I just interrupted. Can you share your screen? Because we can't see. Just rectifying that. Just to clarify, members, there was a technical issue that those watching online couldn't see the presentation. So we're just correcting that. We are now, I think everyone is now able to see it online. So please continue, Mr. Greg. Jake.
Yeah, apologies for that. Right, I'll get back to where we were. Right, we were just going into photographs of the application site and its surroundings. So these photographs are taken from around the application site, looking into it. So this photograph here is looking back. It's rather dark, I'm afraid, so sorry it's not very light. But this is looking at the tree belt that is forming this corner of the application site, not where the red line is, but where the blue line is. And there are some stables here. I've got better photographs of those in a moment. So this photograph is then taken from this location near to Style Cottages, looking back towards the development in the area, existing housing. And then this photograph is taken looking across the site towards this property here, number 63 Station Road. This is this backland house, which is slightly out of keeping with the rest of the linear development in this area. Moving on. Again, these are photographs looking from Paxfield Lane off to the east of the site, looking across the site, showing its current character. It's an open grass field used for equestrian purposes, hence the various stop roof fencing throughout the corner of the site down where the red cursor is at the moment. Then moving swiftly on, these photographs are showing the landscape off to the south. That's those areas I showed you on the overhead photograph earlier on. So looking again from Paxfield Lane and looking across towards these belts of trees. So this photograph is this area here, and this line here, this dark line you can see is the protected trees on the southern boundary of the application site. And then a photograph looking down towards this area, a Station Road, towards the Woodman's Arms, those locations there, so quite a long way out. And this line of trees here is this line of trees on the aerial image. And what I'm trying to show from these photographs is that from this point here, the application site is level, but beyond these trees, the landscape then slopes down quite gently and then begins to get quite steeply sloping off towards Wootton railway station, and then the landscape then from where the station is, then slopes back up towards the south. And then some photographs again within in and around Paxfield Lane. So photograph A here is taken off from the south, looking up towards the application site, across that valley and up to the trees that you can see there, which form the southern boundary of the site. Photograph B is probably slightly clearer, similar view, but from Paxfield Lane, again looking up to this line of trees, which screens the site quite successfully. And the site then itself is level, so it sort of drops away from this sort of precipice of this little hill here. Photograph C is taken looking into the site in that corner where the stable block is, where the red dot is at the moment, looking through the main gate, and you can see here part of the stable block wall, which is stacked up, and then some views of Paxfield Lane itself, which is a sort of tree-lined lane. The trees on this side of the lane start to get thinner as you move down towards Wootton Station. There are some really good views across the southern parts of Wootton. And then some slightly closer views. These are taken from Wootton Station itself. Here's the railway track, and then just looking up to the application site. This line of trees is the one beyond the application site, sort of halfway point, I suppose. And the application site boundary, as the word suggests, is up here on this part of the horizon, noting that you can already see the residential development off to the sides here. And these are just slightly zoomed in and slightly angled versions for the second and third photographs there. And then these photographs are taken from slightly further afield. This one off towards Littletown Lane, looking up towards the application site. This is a zoomed in photograph showing the site boundary here, taken from quite significant distance. And then again, a slightly zoomed in version of that showing the power lines running up towards the application site. Moving on to the properties that surround the application site, then just slightly closer in. These are 1 and 2 style cottages. They are located here at this point. So single-storey dwellings with small rear gardens behind these fences. And then this is a photograph of the existing stables and a small barn. It's a very small barn just into the corner of the site here where there is that blue line. Then looking at the houses on the western side of the site that are at Station Road. So I'll take this photograph first. Here in the upper right hand corner, this is 69 Station Road. This is the house that would be demolished to form the site access. And then the photograph to the left of that is the rear of that property. You can see its rear garden and the trees around this and that existing big shed. And then the gate that then leads into the application field. Then the photographs at the bottom are number 71 Station Road. That is off to the south of the application dwelling. It's front elevation, and then here's the rear. You can see they've got a rear conservatory, 2-storey property. Moving on then, let's get the cursor to work. Here we are. This is number 67 Station Road, so this is to the north of number 69. So this is a single-storey property. And then this is showing the rear of the property over the boundary treatments that are existing for number 69, typical single-storey bungalow. And then these photographs are just showing a street scene towards the application site. This photo is taken from Gravel Pit Road, looking down to the south, and this dark smudge here in the photograph is the gable of number 69, the house proposed to be removed. And then looking at the single-storey properties moving up the road. And then this photograph is taken of a close off to the south, just showing its vehicle access. This is the Acorns, which is close to the application site, on the opposite side of the road. And then some photographs taken from the highway. These are taken today, as the weather shows. So taken from the western side of Station Road, looking up to the north, so towards the Cedars Junction. You can see the curve in the road there. That's number 69, which will be demolished. And this is stood in the entrance, so just here. And you can see there the curvature of the road and the boundary wall that serves both number 69 and a slightly higher wall for number 67, the bungalow. And then looking down the road towards the Acorns, you can see these two-storey properties here. And again, down the road, looking from the other side of the site, just to give a different perspective of the housing along that side of the road and the alignment of the highway in that direction. So the proposals are for 29, this is an outline application, for 29 dwellings. The only detailed issue to be considered for this application is access, along with obviously the principle of having dwellings on this site. The properties that are coloured in pink are proposed to be bungalows, so you can see these are generally aligning the existing dwellings around the area, and then just here on the southern section of the site, with the remainder of the dwellings to be detached two-storey or detached short terraces. These are the blue dwellings here, and then the blue and yellow dwellings here, all to be 2 stories. We don't have depictions of their design or their exact layout at the moment, because they would be reserved matters if this outline application was to be approved. And then we have a detailed layout showing the access, because that is being considered at this stage. Be a pretty typical junction onto the eastern side of Station Road. Station Road carries a 30-mile-per-hour limit, and because of that, visibility displays that measure 43 metres from the point of the access are required, and this plan is showing where those visibility displays would go off to the south and the north of the site. Then leading into the site, the junction would be 15 metres wide here, 15, at the point of the highway, and then narrowing down to 5 metres with 1.8 metre wide pavements either side. Leading into the remainder of the site, councillors will have seen the conditions that are proposed for the application. That includes for a traffic regulation order to impose double yellow lines 15 metres either side of site access. What I noticed on site this morning, though, is that actually from the point of the application site, there are already double yellow lines going up this side of the road. So that TRO would really only need to relate to this side of the highway here, off to the south. The rights of way service have also proposed for planning contribution to be made towards rights of way. The applicant has agreed to enter into that. They've also proposed for a connection to Paxfield Lane, which I'll show you in this slide. So there would be a connection here. Paxfield Lane is a bridleway, so it can be used by horse riders, cyclists and pedestrians. And the proposal is to link in the application site here, and for a 3 metre wide access route through here onto Station Road. So just moving on. And this plan shows where the existing right-of-way network is, existing public bridleways. So the application is recommended for conditional permission subject to a legal agreement, which would secure those obligations, which I explained, but also an affordable for 35% of the dwellings on site to be affordable housing. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. We move on to the speakers. First speaker is Daniel James. There you are. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm speaking on behalf of 21 residents of Paxfield Lane and Fern Hill, who fully support their parish council's comments. This greenfield pasture of ancient form, according to DEFRA, was not identified as suitable for development. We all understand the need for housing, but affordable housing has not been secured if a unilateral undertaking has not been signed. In this scheme, only 69 Station Road is within the settlement boundary. In the draft island planning strategy, this greenfield site remains outside of that boundary, and agricultural land will no longer be presumed suitable for development. A condition limiting the redlined area to 29 units wouldn't prevent further units to the south. Of course, access is not a reserved matter in this application. Traffic counts were made in the first week of the COVID lockdown, underestimating the number of vehicles on Station Road, a strategic link and diversion route from Ryde to Newport. Island roads refer to the average speed as 33 miles per hour and the 85th percentile is 37 miles per hour, the design speed for a road with a 30-mile-per-hour limit. That means 15% of drivers were not only breaking the speed limit, they were exceeding the design speed of the highway. This data is material to the safety of the proposed new road junction. Due to the bend in Station Road, a 43-metre visibility display would be unsafe. The plans show an unrealistic representation of this display, starting from the right-hand side of the exit. In this country, we tend to drive on the left, so that even a 43-metre display is in doubt. Residents know Paxfield Lane and the park homes in Fernhill flood in winter, yet the applicant's flood report states that intrusive ground investigations have not been made. A desktop review without local knowledge is of negligible value. This field is a corridor linking legally protected wildlife sites, the Bridlesford Copses and Quarles Copse. The applicant's ecology report notes evidence of many protected species of bats, which would be harmed by artificial lighting and human activity. Page 6 of that report states it was undertaken outside of the season for botanical surveys, making species difficult to identify. Natural England stated that to grant planning permission would be contrary to its advice. Under Article 6.3 of the Habitats Directive, any potential mitigation payment does not absolve the council of its responsibility to make an appropriate assessment. The council's ecology officer highlighted the legal requirement for a positive gain to for biodiversity, and her concern that measures to enhance ecological connectivity of the site are unachievable. This scheme, together with other recent developments, could total over 100 new houses in Wootton, adding to vehicle traffic and pressure on the GP surgery and primary school, which is already close to capacity. Regarding paragraph 11D of the MPPF and the lack of a 5-year housing supply, adverse impacts of this scheme would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. Thank you.
Thank you. Now go to Mrs. Teresa Cook.
Yep. My name is Teresa Cook and I live at 63 Station Road with my husband. These are the reasons we feel this application should be rejected. It will prejudice highway safety, as this development requires the demolition of 69 Station Road to create an entry and an exit to the site. This would have major traffic implications, as this access point is situated on a blind bend with traffic visibility from the north less than 100 yards, and at 30 miles an hour gives a very short window to join the traffic. We experience the same problem from number 63. The traffic generally does not keep to the speed limit, which is why there is a regular police speed trap on this road. This route carries heavy haulage and coaches accessing both ferries on and off the island. Therefore, 30 plus more vehicles will not help the traffic density, which increases considerably during the holiday season. 2, the overdevelopment within the village, as well as being inappropriate use of greenbelt land registered as agricultural grazing. This planning application for 29 to 40 houses, together with already Hunter's Moon Close on Lushington Hill and new builds adjacent to Harwood's Garage, permission has now been granted for 2 developments at the end of Palmer's Road. This will total to over 100 houses already. Clearly, this is an overdevelopment to Wootton Village, which will obviously create an extra burden of traffic that frequently backs up in either direction through the high street. This proposed development will place yet an additional demand on the currently overloaded local amenities such as Wootton Surgery, school and our only hospital. As the proposed site is situated on a gradient from Station Road down to Paxfield Lane, flooding often occurs after heavy rain, both in our own garden, apart from Paxfield Lane. When building at the rear of our land adjacent to the fields, we hit the water table. A planning officer kindly found a solution, and then we had to add, as the necessary, a pump to alleviate this problem, rather a large pump actually. The development of this site poses a threat not only to the wildlife, but also to the local environment. We frequently have visits from badgers crossing our grass from one side to the other from the fields, which leaves a furrow. We also have bats, the occasional rabbits, foxes and squirrels. Does our local environment really need more concrete and greenhouse gases added to those already existing?
Thank you. If we now come to Wootton Parish Council, Councillor Barry Abraham.
Thank you, Chairman. I do speak on behalf of Wootton Bridge Parish Council. This area of Wootton is noted for its small fields and wide tree-lined hedges and grassland that has not been put to the plough, if ever, for generations. This is land that is rich in species such as dormice, glowworms, frogs, toads, and the flowering plants and butterflies and moths that thrive on. And I think you've already heard it from residents that what they actually see from their gardens. The damp condition of the land is crucial to this ecosystem. The land should not be given up lightly to development. The whole area of the Wootton Mill Pond to the railway line is important to wildlife conservation through AOMB and SSSI. So much so that the conservation group, the People's Trust for Endangered Species, own much of the land close to this site, including Bridlesford Wood that contains so many species of bats. And I think consultation with them should have taken place before any decision can take place this evening. I think that that is absolutely crucial. This is such an important area. It beggars belief that something like this has come forward. 2 years ago, I sat on the Cllr process when potential housing sites came forward. This site never came forward. When two adjacent sites did between Fernhill and Paxfield, both were rejected because of the impact on the area, as well as the unable to get sufficient access. I spoke to the planning officer after it had been raised by residents that a planning application was likely to be made at that time. It was felt that no development should take place because of the impact on the sweeping views and the AOMB towards Haven Street. To finish, Wootton's waistline has continued to expand over the last year and will continue to do so. No developer will offer Wootton any new doctor surgery when we already have one, but we lack the doctors to actually man that surgery. It's also having a great impact. We have no post office to speak of these days. That has gone. And as you've heard, our local school is virtually at capacity. There is no social housing included in our local housing needs survey. That is something that we've actually said, and it is an absolute disgrace that we're not able to provide that. And I know that from things that I've read in the county press, you are trying to take steps to do that. But we need to start to look at what our young people have, and not just build houses for people, retirees, or people that just want to move to the Isle of Wight for a better life form. When residents are told Wootton is a rural service centre, they say, "What's rural about Wootton these days?" And they said, "Well, what services?" We have none of those services that you'd expect to see in a rural service centre. As been outlined this evening, the roads are very busy. In fact, I would say Station Road probably has more traffic speed cots placed on it than any other road by Wootton Station, because of the speed the traffic actually goes through at. And it is coming from the Bay Area predominantly, because people are leaving home a little, but they know that they can get to Fishbourne at a certain time, and Station Road certainly takes some of the consequences of that. And I would urge you tonight to take into account what nature wants, not what people want. Thank you.
Thank you. We now have Charlotte Howlett. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Charlotte Howlett. I'm a chartered planning consultant with BCM. Just to remind members, this is an outline application with only the matter of access to be considered. The definition of access did not include appearance, landscaping, layout of buildings, or size and height of buildings. The Isle of Wight Council has a housing crisis, as you know, with only 58% of housing need being delivered. A presumption in favour of sustainable development, as per paragraph 11 of the MPPF, remains in place. This site is in a sustainable location, being adjacent to a settlement boundary with good access to bus stops and paved links to shops, services and facilities. There is also a proposed pedestrian cycle link between Paxfield Lane and Station Road, which adds to the sustainability benefits of the scheme. The Isle of Wight Council have the highest number of sanctions imposed on it by central government, including needing to prepare an action plan, adding additional 20% to its 5-year housing land supply. Paragraph 11 requires there are no adverse impacts of approving this outline application that would significantly or demonstrably outweigh the benefits. At appeal, this is the key policy test the planning inspector will assess the application on. Small to medium sites such as this offer a shorter-term solution to get houses built. The Parish Council have commented that the site was not identified as suitable within Cllr. In fact, the site was considered as developable back in 2014. There were questions over the suitability of the access, which have now been dealt with, along with other matters that now have the full support of the Planning Department. Senior planning officers have offered ongoing support for the scheme with an extensive pre-application process with a recommendation of approval. The scheme has been thought out over many years, and Island Roads have also been on board with it from day one. The key points are that policy 1 is out of date. However, the site is immediately adjacent to the settlement boundary, and this shows it's sustainable. There'll be on-site affordable housing that can be offered at 35% to be a policy DM4. Amendments can be made to this layout. It's only illustrative and should not be the main point of any discussion. The question you need to consider is whether the site is sustainable and therefore the principle of new housing is acceptable, and if access can be achieved. The answer to these questions is yes. There are option agreements in place with 2 neighbouring properties, allowing for good visibility displays. Island Roads have supported the application, and technical drawings and surveys have all been submitted. All other information is illustrative to demonstrate the site can offer a number of houses with mixed sizes and designs, which can also account for young people in the area, supporting local shops and facilities and the school in future years. In terms of potential impact on neighbours, the site has 12 dwellings, gardens backing onto it, which is a relatively small number for this sort of site. This works in the scheme's favour and will allow a layout avoiding new dwellings being placed too close to existing dwellings. The scheme will form a natural extension to Wootton with enough space for an innkeeping layout and landscaping. Trees will be protected, and there's opportunities to enhance the landscape and biodiversity with new planting, which can be decided later in a reserved application. A drainage strategy has also been prepared, which is only for this illustrative scheme, but that's way beyond what other applications for outline consent will present. There'll also be financial contributions to the public right-of-way as well as solar protection area secured by a legal agreement. To conclude, this is clearly sustainable development and is not within a designated area. As required by paragraph 11 of the MPPF, there are no adverse impacts of approving this outline application that would significantly or demonstrably outweigh the benefits. The local planning authority remain in complete control of the final design through formal applications of reserved matters, imposing conditions and securing legal agreements as necessary. Trees and ecology have been considered, surveys were undertaken and reports were submitted. A finalised design can offer enhancements and mitigation measures as suggested. An indicative drainage strategy has been prepared to demonstrate that development can have a suitable drainage solution. The highways access and junction have been technically assessed and are considered to be safe and acceptable by qualified highways consultants. The Isle of Wight Council should approve this sustainable development without delay to allow housing to be delivered in the shorter term, which will assist with the Council's housing delivery figures and help avoid further sanctions. Importantly, there are no sound planning reasons why this scheme should not be approved by this committee. It is sustainable, achievable, suitable and deliverable. Thank you.
Thank you. Now go to Councillor Darrell Pitcher, local councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to start by reinforcing the point that this is an outline application. The numbers mooted are a guide, and even with a condition of no more than 29, there is no guarantee that we will not be looking at an application for a variation later to up the number. Surveyors sent to the site in preparation for this application suggested that 50 was a realistic target. Likewise, there is no guarantee that 29 will be built. It could only be a dozen or so executive houses, meaning the affordable element will be 2 or 3, maybe 4-bedroom detached, going for over $500,000, which is not, in my view, affordable. The layout and types on the plans before you are no more than a concept, a pretty picture of a slew of affordable housing with nothing to back up the claim. The substantive part of what we are dealing with here is the access, an access that barely scrapes the minimum sight lines for a road described as Class C, but which is in fact an A road in all but name. This access would not be allowed onto Lushington Hill, but they carry similar traffic volumes. The report on traffic numbers was done during the first week of lockdown. It is so out of kilter that you cannot even extrapolate from it. The weight of traffic would be significantly different, for instance, during the Isle of Wight Festival, when the one-way system sends all the ride-bound traffic from Newport along Station Road directly past its entrance. The area is known as a speeding black spot. Police speed traps are quite a common sight outside Wootton Station. There is a speed awareness sign a few metres from this proposed entrance, a sign which regularly catches people well over the limit, including articulated lorries, which have been clocked at over 50 miles an hour. I recently had cause to use the driveway at number 67, adjacent to the exit proposal. It was difficult and felt borderline unsafe. I had to rush to get across the carriageway as I could not see far enough to be sure there was no oncoming traffic. The cycling report submitted as evidence suggests that this section of road is not safe for cyclists. Why then is it safe for an exit to a housing estate? With regard to the field itself, it is a shame that members were not given a site visit. Had you been able to do so, you would have seen with your own eyes that the area is unsuitable. It is in effect a wedge-shaped piece of land with housing on 2 of its 3 sides. The photos you have been shown do not give a full understanding. The site is far more cramped and more constrained than suggested in them. This field is the green space that residents need for quality of life. It acts as a green corridor for many protected species, including bats, squirrels, badgers, and invertebrates, including glowworms. Currently, it is a quiet, dark area at night for wildlife. This infill site falls outside the land allocated in the draft island planning strategy, and for good reason. It is not sustainable. There is a substantial flooding risk associated with this site. Being on a hill, the water cascades down into Paxfield Lane and even affects Fern Hill behind Paxfield. The reports on this and other issues are very sparse. The developer has not done due diligence. There should be no connecting lane between the proposed development and Paxfield Lane. Paxfield is a quiet residential cul-de-sac owned and maintained by the residents. Any additional traffic, even just pedestrian or cycles, will impact on their privacy, and the extra wear will cost them money to fix. There is also an issue with the water main, which runs just under the surface, which the residents also have to maintain. This failed 3 times last year alone. Any extra movement will cost them dear. To go back on my earlier point, if Station Road is safe enough for a new junction, there is no need for an extra exit onto Paxfield Lane. You can't have it both ways. To sum up, this proposed outline development is placed in an area unsuitable for housing, given the topography, the environmental impact, and impact on local residents. These later 2 being in direct contravention of the island's UNESCO biosphere status, where communities and wildlife should be protected. Even if the site were perfect for development, and if there were cast iron proposals for real affordable housing contained within, the access is dangerous and will cause accidents. There is not enough vision and the traffic is too fast and heavy. Please reject this application on these points. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, do you want to come back on any points?
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of really just correction points. Just to say there was a comment that the site is not in the settlement boundary. councillors will be aware from previous committees that we are under the presumption in favour of sustainable development, and therefore settlement boundaries are not relevant. The relevant consideration is whether a site is sustainable, and that is the current test for housing. It's not whether it's within or immediately adjacent to, it is whether it's sustainable. Secondly, there are a couple of references to Greenfield or Greenbeltland. We don't have Greenbeltland on the Isle of Wight as a policy position. One other correction is, I think there was mention of an exit out onto Paxfield Road, or Paxfield Lane, sorry, the bridleway off to the west of the site. That's not a proposal. The proposal is for a footpath or cycle link onto that lane, but it wouldn't be vehicular traffic. And that's it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. If we go to questions from members. Councillor Quirk.
We've heard from the objectors about the issues of the biodiversity and the fauna, flora, etc. in this area. Can you confirm that this is not a triple SI site and is not adjacent to a triple SI site? Is that correct?
Yes, the site's not subject to any designations, and as the plan showed earlier, I'm just trying to zoom back to it for the designations just to show you.
A comment for Councillor Fuller then. Perhaps we should be encouraging town and parish councils to identify if they think that they have sites that should be designated as triple SIs. We should actually have some sort of mechanism to remind them of that and encourage them to register, because that then protects sites like this. It's a bit late now. Second question, was there pre-app discussions about the development of this site? Because it seems to me that the proposals are not in line with the local housing numbers.
Yes, there were pre-app discussions. I think they were fairly brief, but there were pre-app discussions for the site, yes.
The local housing numbers suggest that it's 95%, 96% would need to be 1 and 2 bedroom properties. That we haven't got an indication here of what the properties are, but the size of the bungalows suggests that they're quite large properties, because they're 2.5 times the size of the terraced houses, so they would appear to be quite large. An observation, I would personally much rather see some of those converted into blocks of 4 maisonettes that would provide the 1 or 2 bedroom houses that we have, accommodation that we need, rather than what is the best option for selling them for the developers.
Is there any comment, Mr.
Yeah, so I mean, what I would say in terms of the Wootton Bridge Housing Needs Survey is that it will reflect the wishes of local people, but it doesn't account obviously for incomers. So a housing survey will look at the actual parish council's own area. It doesn't survey other people who may wish to move into Wootton. The other thing I would say is that the survey does warn that the return rate for the survey was 17.2%, so fairly low. And so it does say that its figures are sort of maximums or minimums. So there is a slight health warning with that. But obviously at the moment, what we're looking at is an outline. And if it was approved, then any detailed planning application would have to meet the most up-to-date, most recent housing needs survey that covered that area, be it a housing survey undertaken by the council or by Wootton Bridge Parish Council.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor.
We do know that the Council's island-wide survey is driven by what estate agents can sell, not what the market actually needs, and takes very little account of the housing list of the council. I think that's something that actually does need to be looked at, because it's an erroneous figure, as is quite clearly identified by the local housing need in Wootton.
Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, great to see Councillor Abraham here. In regards to the current use of the land, I know it was mentioned that, that I think there's horses on site and so on. Is this land currently farmed in any shape or form?
So I've been to the site twice, and each time it's just been horses. There's an access from number 69 Station Road. It's owned by the residents of that property, so I'm assuming that it's their land and they choose to keep horses on it.
Yes, Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chairman. And in regards to the comments from Island Roads, there's quite a lot of conditions relating to the highways. Can we have at least an opinion on whether those conditions can be achieved? Because I guess we could be like we have done maybe elsewhere. We've approved something that that is recommended for approval and has approval recommended by Island Roads, but under conditions, and it's whether those conditions can be met. Do we have a feel for that?
Mr. White, would you like to answer that Pacific Road question?
Thank you, Chair. The off-site highway improvements in terms of the junction itself, the footway improvements and the uncontrolled pedestrian crossing could all be achieved within the limit of the public highway. And if you approve the application tonight and then a detailed application came forward, they would be covered by technical assessment as part of the Highways Act. In respect to the TRO, that's remote from the planning process, so I can't sit here tonight and say yes, that can be guaranteed. From a highway safety perspective, it would appear achievable, but that decision isn't made by officers necessarily.
Before I come to Spink, can I just come in for a question on the back of Councillor Price about the TROs, right? Obviously, it has to go through proper process. I recently heard that highways were not inclined to guarantee anything to do with TROs, whether they would approve them or not. Is that true?
I'm unable to comment on that other than to say, sat here tonight, I can't guarantee that approval of a TRO would be granted because it has to go through a separate process from the planning process.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Spink.
Thank you, Chair.
And then I've got Councillor Medland and then Councillor Smart.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if I could just ask Mr. Chick to just clarify. Councillor Daniel James raised that it's not immediately adjacent to the settlement boundary. And in the report of the planning officer, it effectively says at paragraph 6.1 that it is. Is it or isn't it a site that is immediately adjacent to the settlement boundary as a matter of laws? Can we have that clarified, please?
Yes, so let's get the laser pen to work again. So this thick brown line you can see going around Wootton is the settlement boundary. The application site is next to the settlement boundary, adjoins the settlement boundary in 2 points here. So it is immediately adjacent to the settlement boundary, but as I've said, settlement boundaries effectively don't apply now because of the presumption in favour.
So it is immediately adjacent to, just by virtue, you say, of that relatively small part. Is that right?
Immediately adjacent on this part, and it also is immediately adjacent on this part here.
And is it correct? My understanding is, but if you could confirm that it's correct, that it's not, it won't be within the settlement boundary as drawn up by the new draft plan. So it's outside the settlement boundary of the new draft plan.
I couldn't tell you that, but what I can tell you is that the current draft plan has not been through a public examination. There's guidance within the MPPF as to how much weight you give to an emerging plan. It is an emerging plan, it's not an adopted plan. The advice in the MPPF is that there are certain trigger points that make the plan more of a material consideration as you get closer towards adoption. But at this time, it's not been through full council assessment, it's not been through a planning inspector. So although it is a material consideration, it should be applied minor weight.
Well, perhaps just arising out of that, if we could please check whether it's within, it shouldn't take very long, whether it's within the new draft plan. I think it was raised, I may be wrong, but I think from memory it was raised by Councillor Daniel James in his written report, which is on the list of objectors. I think I'm right in saying that. And secondly, your point, as it were, with regard to the draft plan, I mean, it also includes a section, doesn't it, section 48C, where the degree of consistency with relevant policy within the MPPF. So in other words, there are 3 criteria, but 2 of which are relevant, I suggest here. One is the state or the stage of the emerging plan, but also one can consider whether or not, if the emerging plan is relevant to the policy of the MPPF, then the emerging plan can carry more weight than otherwise. It's not simply a test of how far it's gone along the line, is it?
It's not working. So I think Mr. Bolter's going to answer that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, this is an issue that we've spoken about at committee previously, isn't it? That's been addressed through a number of reports that the committee has seen, and it remains the case that the officer advice is that the island planning strategy is at such a stage in its preparation that we would advise against giving weight to it. You are quite correct, Councillor Spink, that paragraph 48 of the MPPF does say that in certain situations weight can be given to the emerging plan. That's certainly not in dispute. But we would advise as officers that in this instance and in the policy context that we find ourselves in at the moment, that we would not be giving weight to the emerging IPS at this stage.
And do you have any authority that you can show me to substantiate that paragraph 48C shouldn't be applied?
What we are doing? No.
Mr. Guard? I can't come in. Oh, thank you. Yeah, Councillor Spink, I think I'm looking at my colleagues in planning, just for clarity, that perhaps it would assist if, I mean, you've got it before you, but if I just read paragraph 48, it says local authorities may give weight to relevant policies in emerging plans according to, and you've read them through, the stage of preparation of the emerging plan, and it says the more advanced its preparation, the greater weight that may be given. B, the extent to which there are unresolved objections to relevant policies. The less significant an unresolved objection, the greater the weight that may be given. And C, the degree of consistency of the relevant policies in the emerging plan to this framework. The closer the policies in the emerging plan to the policies in the framework, the greater the weight that may be given. I believe what you're being advised from staff in planning is that that paragraph provides guidance on when weight may be given by the planning authority. And I don't think they're suggesting weight cannot be given. The matter of weights to be attached to material consideration is for the planning authority to consider. It's for them to make the determination on that. What the advice is that the stage that the emerging strategy is at is little weight should be given to it, but the actual amount of weight to be attached to that as a material consideration is entirely for you as the decision maker.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't want to labour the point, but just one more question on this matter, if I may, this aspect of it, because it did seem to me that if it's not included in the new draft plan as a site, then it could only be developed if it's in the wider rural area, as a rural exception site, couldn't it? And this wouldn't qualify as a rural exception site, would it?
Well, it's not being proposed as a rural exception
No.
site, but that we, at this stage, we can't say it wouldn't qualify for a rural exception site because that would be something we'd have to assess once the island planning strategy is
It
in
wouldn't
place.
meet the criteria, I mean, we can say that, of a rural exception site. And if it's not going to be in our draft plan, it is a rural property. Ought we to be granting planning permission to something which our new draft plan would not allow?
I would agree with that point. However, I would come back to the point that we are dealing with the development plan in front of us, which is currently the MPPF and the Island Plan core strategy. And those are the core documents of the development plan against which we must, in the first instance, make our decision. And as Ben very kindly helped me out in terms of that explanation, the advice would be that the weight that we would give, the officers advise you would give as a decision maker to the emerging IPS is very little given the stage that it is at.
Well, thank you. You've answered those questions. I had a couple more, if that's all right.
Okay.
The threat to the wildlife, as I understand it, this is a green corridor between an SSI and ancient woodland to the west. Is that a correct understanding?
The application site is not designated, so that's the point in terms of wildlife. So
it is a corridor between two designated sites, is it not?
It's not a corridor, it's a field within an area that is close to designated sites.
Between two designated.
What you choose to call it, Councillor Spink, is up to you.
Thank you. There have been protected bats and other species found on there. Is it of concern that the construction on that site of 29 houses, together with the habitation, as it were, of those sites, those houses by persons when they're completed, cars accessing the site, and lighting, that is likely, is it not, to have a significant effect on the wildlife and the protected species?
No, it's not. The conclusion of officers is it won't have a significant effect, and that's what the ecology officer has concluded. So species surveys were undertaken, and that's set out within the ecological report that's been provided by Eagle Eye. Those species surveys showed that there was a low level of bat activity, and that the site was restricted to commuting and foraging bats. What the ecological survey said was that the site could be improved through the development for bats through mitigatory planting, additional planting, and that's been agreed with by the ecology officer. The ecology report also confirms that no hedgerows would be removed, they'd be protected through the construction phase. There is mitigation measures proposed for the construction phase. They've been agreed by the council's ecology officer. They include not undertaking works at certain times. And in addition to that, commuting corridors would be added to the western northern boundaries of the site, and additional bird and bat boxes would also be installed. So that's the opinion of the ecologist who undertook the surveys, and the council's ecologist has agreed with those conclusions.
So just two questions, if you would indulge me.
Well, I think it's important to give an opportunity to others. So I'd like others to be able to speak first, if that's with you, Councillor Spink. Councillor
as well, Kate. It's important that members of this committee don't treat this as an opportunity to cross-examine planning officers. It's not a court of law. It's a planning committee of a local planning authority, and I think we all need to have regard to that. Thank you, Chair.
comment, if I may, more than a detailed question. Being such a, I actually went down to look at the site because I assumed, because we weren't going to look at it, that it had been come before us before. But I ascertained that it was because it was an outline. And whilst I realised that if it was to go through today and be approved, then presumably the detailed would be looked at a site visit. However, with such a crucial site, I am still surprised that in fact a decision was made not to go on an outline to this site. I stood by at the top of Paxfield Lane. I could see from where the various roads came into opposite it, and it did seem to be the speed the traffic was going. It did seem to be problematic as to how safe it would be. But I won't say anything anymore because obviously, as I say, I did go complete with whatever to try and look to see what the site was, etc. Thank you.
I think your question within that, if I can put to Mr. Bolt, was why the decision was decided not to have a site visit. Thank you. Doctor.
Yep, thank you, Chair. That's quite right, Councillor Smart. So as councillors will be aware, that there is no provision that a site visit must be undertaken for every single application that the committee considers. I will advise as to whether I consider a site visit is necessary or appropriate, and then a view will be reached at that point. Now, the advice that I gave was that in this instance, I didn't consider a site visit was necessary, and you've touched on a couple of the reasons behind that sort of rationale. So the fact that the application was in outline and the fact that in front of the committee is the question around the principle of development, and the fact that the item in front of the committee looks at access and internal road layout and parking, given the nature of the comments provided by the Island Roads colleagues on that issue, it was not considered that in this instance, alongside the information that would be provided to members of the committee through the presentation, that a site visit was necessary.
Thank you. Councillor Jarman, did I hear you? Your hand up was before. And then I've got Councillor, well, I've got Councillor Quirk. We can come back after Councillor Medlands. Is that okay, Councillor Quirk? Councillor Jarman.
Thank you, Chair. I also
Councillor Brodie.
I also tried to make a drop-in site visit. I found it very difficult to have a good view, I have to say, of the site, and I wasn't entirely comfortable parking in the road with my own safety at the time either. I thought that was somewhat risky. But I am interested, as a question, how the zero carbon policy will be obtained here, and by what mechanism the developer will provide the zero carbon meet requirement, such that the build, lifetime and restoration carbon impact of the site will be met. That's the first question I have. The second question I have, it relates to the officer's identification of this as an ecological corridor, which is in page 43, section 15.4, talking to measures to enhance the ecological connectivity of the site, retention of ecological corridors and supplementary planting. And I wondered what measures would be put in place to enhance the existing ecological connectivity and corridors. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jarman. So that there's no current planning policy requirement to meet a zero carbon requirement for this development. There's nothing in the island plan to say that. At the moment for housing, the requirement for meeting carbon context is within the building regulations in terms of insulation, those kind of things, but there's no current requirement in planning policy to meet a zero carbon requirement. In terms of enhancing connectivity through the site, the ecological report suggests that hedgerows will be retained and then additional planting and buffers around the site and would be undertaken on various boundaries, and that would be to ensure that those existing hedgerows that you saw in the photographs would be retained, but also bolstered through additional planting. And those are the proposals to enhance connectivity.
Yes, Councillor Jarman, supplementary.
Just to that point, I'm uncertain with the answer about how hedgerows would actually enhance the existing ecological connectivity, given that the entire site is currently a green field. It would seem that covering it with houses would inevitably restrict the ecological connectivity rather than enhance it. That's just a question, perhaps an observation, and both at the same time. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to go back to the access issues we were talking about earlier. One thing I think it's a very good application, by the way, in many respects. It's been well thought through and well prepared. But there are some things which I do worry me. One of them is the road survey that was taking place in late March 2020. At the time that we had the first lockdown announced, when people were told not to do any unnecessary travel at all. Surely that has to be repeated. I'm quite worried about Station Road. It's a busy road. We all know what it's like. And I think, perhaps it states in the papers that it's dangerous for cycling. And we're hearing about these speeding issues. I think we need a little bit. I think we should give it a bit more attention. Is there some mitigation we can carry out to slow traffic or do something? Because it seems we are creating, and this is a single access site effectively. Everything's going in and out the same way. Anything goes wrong at that point, it's a big problem. I'd also like to talk a bit about the extended displays of vision, obviously, which require double yellow lines. I'm glad to hear that some of them are already there, because obviously that displaces parked cars. And I think, as a general principle, we still need to start thinking about the effect on street parking of all these TROs we keep asking ourselves about.
Councillor Medden, the specific questions are to do with what could be done.
Okay, my specific question is what happens if the neighbours who need to sell part of their presumably front walls for the visual display to be created? What if they don't want to sell their front walls to be demolished and turned into a visual display?
Mr. White, are you able to answer a collective question?
Thank you, Chair. All I would say is we've considered the layout as put before us and as shown within the red line boundary of the application. So what has been detailed in the proposed layout complies with the current posted 30-mile-an-hour speed limit on that part of Station Road. If for whatever reason it subsequently transpired that the visibility displays couldn't be achieved because the land wasn't available, then it would fail to meet the criteria. But what we've evaluated is the junction layout put before us.
Okay, I now have Councillor Brodie. I'll come to you and Quirkham first because you've asked questions before. So Councillor Brodie hasn't.
Thank you. Yes, I also went over there on Saturday. I cycled over from Newport so as I wouldn't be at risk, etc. And just for information, I think there are already double yellow lines outside this towards the Cedars side. Anyway, nobody would park there, and most of the houses would have enough room for at least 3 cars to park, from what I could see, or at least 2 anyway, Darryl. They're fairly large houses, so just addressing that. I will just declare a quick interest in what I'm about to ask about, as I am a member, though an inactive member of Cycle White, and I'm quite surprised that they didn't offer any comment on this, because one of the things I know as somebody who cycles between Newport and Rye quite frequently is that Station Road is the missing link, the missing safe link for cyclists, particularly those coming up at the back of Mary Rose Avenue, I think it's called Fern Hill or whatever, to access the old railway track opposite Wootton Station. You have to go down Station Road. The speed is very fast. And indeed, on Saturday, as I pulled away from 69, having taken some photographs and had cycled down and indicated I was going to turn right into the cycle track, a car decided to overtake me at 45, 50 miles an hour in my estimation. It's not safe. And my question is, are we not missing a real opportunity here on Bicycle Island to fill in the gap between the top of Mary Rose Avenue and the start of the cycle track opposite Wootton Station? Can't we be seeking, as part of any permission that's given in the future, some identified cycle lane along Station Road? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chick, are you able to?
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Brodie. So yes, the existing cycle routes, as Councillor Brodie says, I'm just showing on this plan here, come along, well, according to this map, come up the High Street and then along Station Road. So the rights of way officer has asked that a cycle link is provided through the site, because there are also public bridleways which cyclists can obviously use to come through the site to cut off this little section here, so that cyclists can then come through the site. They would still need to go onto a section of Station Road and then come out onto the cycle track here, which is opposite to Wootton Station. I mean, the development site itself can't deliver what is a wider strategic issue. That's something that, you know, the council can think about as highway authority. But what this site can do, at least, is deliver the section of cycle link which the rights of way manager has requested and that the applicant has agreed to. So what that would result in is a 3 metre wide section through the site for cyclists to be able to use. And obviously, if a reserve matters application came forward, that would be something that would need to be designed into that scheme, because at the moment the paths either side of the access road are each 2 1.8 metre wide paths. And I guess the way to overcome that would be to say, let's combine the two and put one on one side and nothing on the other. But at the moment, you know, this scheme can't be the solution to all problems, unfortunately. But what it can do is deliver that small amount of mitigation, just to take a small section off. But obviously it won't affect the people who are coming from the north, because I doubt that they would decide to come along Station Road, down Paxfield Road, go across the site and then back onto Station Road. They would just go down Station Road because it's just the quickest route.
Jack, could I come back? I mean, firstly, I don't know where that plan comes from, but certainly to suggest that Wootton High Street is the cycle route is quite astonishing to me. I would always turn left by the Lakeside Hotel when I crossed Wootton Bridge and come up the back of Mary Rose Avenue. I think it's called Fern Hill, is it Darrell? And then come out almost at the junction with Paxfield Lane and then cycle down. What I'm suggesting is that rather than have a cycleway between Paxfield Lane, which, well, you need very strong wheels to cycle on, to be frank, I'd rather the money was spent on some sort of cycle lane along Station Road, which, apart from designating it for cyclists, would also slow traffic on Station Road. Anything like that does slow people down, and I do think there's possibly we're missing opportunity. As you know, Mr. Chick, affordable housing rings my bells most of the time, unless there are serious reasons not to support it. But if I am going to support something like this, I like to see some advantage to the local infrastructure. For example, the objectors talk about the GP surgery. I'm not surprised it's packed to the rafters, because it's dealing with half of Newport at the moment, because the West Street practice in Newport is closed and there doesn't seem to be anything happening there. We do need to be looking for advantage if we're going to approve things. And I accept everything about the presumption in favour of sustainable development, and I accept everything regarding we shouldn't give hardly any weight to the emerging island planning strategy at the moment. Thank you, Chair, for bearing with me.
Thank you.
I too went down Station Road this morning. It's very hard to just really get an impression from Station Road. And I would add to Shirley's comment that I actually think a site visit would have been very helpful here. And I would encourage us, just because it's an outline permission, not to just go for saying you don't need to be there, because we're deciding whether it's going to happen or not now. And then we start to talk about the details. And I think it's really important up front to get it right. But that's not my question. The documentation says that the surface water is going to be sort of collected and then it's going to sort of dissipate down into the substrata. Can you just explain that, where it's going to happen and what happens there?
Oh, it's working. It's decided to wake up. So this plan in front of you is showing the drainage strategy for the application site. The site, according to the British Geological Survey, is underlain by a mix of sand, gravel and silt. That's informed by 3 boreholes which have been taken close to the site along Station Road at Glendale Close, 1 in Paxfield Lane and 1 at Gravel Pit Road. And they showed good understanding of the geological strata of the area, and it is suitable for permeable drainage, which is good to hear because quite a lot of the island is not. So what this plan is showing is that the water from the roofs of the application properties and the hard surfaces around them will be sent into these collection areas, which will then rely on what we call positive drainage, which is natural infiltration. In addition to that, there is a proposed swale through the site that would collect any surface water from the proposed roads around the site. And again, that would allow it to infiltrate naturally into the ground. That's what has been designed into this site is also a 1 in 100 year storm event, and also that 40% addition for climate change that we often discuss at planning committee. So officers have looked at the proposed drainage strategy, which obviously at the moment is an outline, but we do consider that flooding is not a constraint to the site, and that that means that the actual surface water scheme for the site can be considered at the detailed stage, but ultimately that infiltration for this site is a suitable solution.
Thank you. Councillor Price.
Thank you for letting me come back, Chairman. Just touching on what Councillor Brodie said with regards to cycling, one of my questions was about exactly that. You know, I would like nothing more than to have a completely tarmac surface from Newport to Wootton through my ward, and I right now hope that that may happen before the next election, even, who knows. But you know, it'd be great to see that route completed. The problem is that when you get to Wootton, it's then dangerous. Now, if we had, as part of an application like this, a designated cycle lane on the highway, is that possible with this application? Is it unreasonable? But is it something that we could seek to put in place? The other question I had was with regards to the route through the site. I think if that route from Station Road to Paxfield Lane, while it looks like it probably goes nowhere, it should be a priority route through that site. It shouldn't be just a little spur that adds on to the back of it. And probably I would say that so the question is, could it be a priority route through that site? Now, that would then take potentially cyclists and pedestrians to Paxfield Lane. I would say it probably would benefit the residents of Paxfield Lane more than it would anyone else. It wouldn't be a disadvantage, it'd be probably an advantage. But then if we can't get anything in regards to the cycle lane on Station Road as part of this application, could there be a financial contribution from the developer for the ongoing upkeep of Paxfield Lane. So sorry, 3 questions there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you
Chair.
very much. Yeah, sorry, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Price. Yes, in terms of a wider scheme, this is not a large development. It's, you know, the proposal is for 29 houses. It's an outline at the moment. These types of schemes struggle to deliver major infrastructure. When you're looking at a 500 or 600 house scheme, then you can look at major infrastructure, and potentially that site may pay for all of it. But what you do have to have in place is an adopted scheme, adopted by the council, for some sort of cycle route. Now, at the last committee, we saw an application come forward that related to a scheme that was in place. It's a priority scheme. It's adopted by the council. It's mentioned in the council's forward plan for the West White Greenway. What we don't have in this area is that kind of scheme adopted at the moment. There could be, but at the moment we don't have that. So this scheme, 29 houses, whatever it is, 25, who knows, at the reserve matter stage, wouldn't be such a weight that it could actually make huge changes to Station Road, because those kind of changes would make this site completely unviable. And yes, it probably would be unreasonable to put on a condition that said you shall put a cycle lane from this site, from wherever that route is near to Wootton Station, and up to whatever other link it is, top of Paxfield Lane, whatever it is, because it's not the current adopted council scheme, and also a site of this size just couldn't pay for that amount of works. What a site like this can do is contribute to those works, and a contribution has been put forward by a rights of way manager to be used in the local area, and that would be used to maintain local rights of way. And actually, that's one of the things that Mr. Clark said, is that Paxfield Road will need some maintenance, and that's what that contribution is for, and the applicant has agreed to pay it. In terms of the actual route through the site, officers recognise, and the rights of way manager recognises, this is an outline scheme. So basically what the right of way manager has said is, my shopping list is that we need a 3 metre wide cycle route through the site, and that is something which is conditioned, that needs to be provided throughout the site. And then as the applicant then deliberates for whatever scheme they do for reserve matters, that is something that the planning authority would say, well, actually, this is something you've got to put in if we're going to support this scheme, if the scheme gets outline planning permission.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to move on to debate, and whether there's ask members if there's any proposals to come forward. Thank you. Councillor Bray.
I think this is a very interesting application. It isn't cut and dry by any means. I've listened to all that's been said, and I do agree with comments, particularly from Mrs. Cook and Councillor Pitcher. The road's dangerous. Coming out of any house along that road and turning right or left is dangerous, because it's right on a sharp bend, and traffic does go far too fast around that bend. I listened to what Councillor Abraham said. I respect Barry's opinion on planning tremendously, having worked with him. I know his knowledge on planning, and the area in question obviously is very familiar to him as well. Mentioned about the school was mentioned as well. Yeah, the school is full. Well, the school is virtually full. There's only 4 spare places this September. It's one of the most near to full schools on the island, so there would be an issue potentially with schools. On the flip side of that, if we were to agree this, as Councillor Brody and Councillor Price said, the cycleway, you know, to get the developer to pay to complete the cycleway, make it a safe cycle route, is an opportunity we need to grab, and also perhaps a condition around the affordable housing element of this. You know, it shouldn't be left to last. It should be done quite early in the process, because affordable housing is what we desperately need. So I think it's a finely balanced application, this one. But road safety is really, really a concern of mine, and I think that's a big worry I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brodie.
Yeah, and I mean, I could reflect everything that Councillor Brading said. I mean, it's, you know, this is why presumably it's come to committee. It's in the balance here. From my point of view, you know, I do have concerns about the single access point onto Station Road. the speed of traffic along there. I know there's a condition about TROs and there's no guarantee you'll get them anytime this millennium, you know, so, you know, I mean, sorry, but, you know, that's the reality, you know, of getting a TRO these days. And the whole issue regarding, you know, infrastructure, we've rehearsed these arguments time and time again. As a keen cyclist, you know what I mean? You know, I could put this first and say, well, I demand a proper cycle lane along Station Road, and the one through this development, so it's a waste of time, to be frank. You know, and it is a waste of time. If you're going to spend money on it, spend it on Station Road, not there. But the key thing is that this is adjacent to the settlement boundary. Irrespective of that, there's a presumption in favour of sustainable development. And on top of that, it provides 35% affordable homes. If there are 29, that's 10 affordable homes. That's 10 families that get a roof over their heads who currently don't have a decent roof over their head. And in the balance, I weigh that affordable housing need, which is, after a hot meal, a roof over your head is the second greatest human need as far as I'm concerned. And we have to address that. We have to address that seriously. If we can house 10 island families, I want to see that, unless there are very strong reasons why not. Therefore, I propose that we accept this application and that we recommend conditional permission. Thank you. I'll look for a seconder.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Quirk. Apologise. To actually approve the application for approval. So can I have a show of hands for those in favour of approval?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Those against?
1, 2, 3.
3. It's approved. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Was there any abstention? I apologise, Councillor. That's 1. Thank you. That's is approved. If we now move to item 6, which is a report of Chief Executive, I believe is being withdrawn. It's not needed, so it's with really.
Yes, Chair. I just want to get an update really from the Cabinet member since he's here. At the last meeting, something called the Planning Protocols Working Group was established under Councillor Fuller's oversight. A couple of weeks ago, I decided to offer myself as the unaligned member on that group. I'm just wondering if it's ever going to meet. Is it planning to get any recommendations to this year's annual council or one before the next elections or anything like that? It would be quite nice to have an update and certainly to be invited to any meetings. I did understand that there was a meeting on Monday, but apparently that didn't happen, which I wasn't invited to. But I'd like an update on that. Is it a serious proposal that we agreed last month, or was it just a lot of hot air? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can Councillor Fuller, are you able to answer that question?
Thank you very much, Chairman. I received no invitation to a meeting earlier on in the week, and I can confirm that. From my perspective, I would welcome the work of the Working Party and those recommendations made. I would trust and respect the matter that I will have an overview of, but until I am invited and have an overview of that work, I can't comment any further, Chairman. Thank you.
Chair, can I just clarify that the working group shouldn't really be operating unless Councillor Fuller is aware of what it's doing. It shouldn't be meeting in secret from certain members of it. Thank you.
Can I make a suggestion, Councillor Fuller, that you meet up with the working group, right, and perhaps report back to this planning committee at the next meeting, so that we can have an update that working group, as approved by this planning committee, is operating properly and is involving all the members, including Councillor Brodie. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. One of the things that I would ask for is for the terms of reference to be sort of like forwarded, because I think that is quite important as well. As yet, unless I've missed it somewhere, I still haven't received those terms of reference. So thank you for that. Thank you for that, Councillor Brodie.
Councillor Jarman, did you want to?
Yes, Chair, thank you. Just to say that we are working on the terms of reference. They have been reviewed by the staff side already. They're not completely finalised yet, but I'll be very happy to pass them on to Councillor Fuller in their draft form for his review.
Chairman, could I also suggest that as Vice Chairman also Councillor Brodie is included as well, because I think that Councillor Brodie as Vice Chairman of the Planning Committee should also be involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brodie.
Yeah, of course, I may not be Vice Chair for that much longer. However, as somebody who's volunteered to go on this, it would be quite nice to know what's going on. I thought this was an administration that was in favour of transparency and openness. I increasingly find it a very secretive organisation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. No, I'm not going to take further, Councillor Jarman. I think we've made the point. We've come to the end of this meeting, so I close the meeting. Thank you.